Many miles away from the East Coast, in the Ozarks of northern Arkansas, three individuals were about to learn of this horror. It was coming like a tidal wave, and they were far from their home of Arborsville, Illinois. Mundane lives led to boredom and resulted in their ambitious vacation. They wanted to clear their heads before continuing down life's path. The peacefulness of the outdoors refreshed their internal clocks and gave them pause before they would return home. The adventurers had been friends for most of their adult lives. John Kilroy and Eve Parker were longtime sweethearts and were engaged, planning on a spring wedding the following year. They had been together ever since Eve had moved to Arborsville when she was 20 years old. During their hiking trip, they had aged 10 years, but were still just as passionate as they had always been. John had been friends with Logan Foster, the third member of their troop, since he was a child. Because of their friendship, Logan had grown to see Eve as something of a sister. Trails crisscrossed large expanses of forests and hills. The trees had mostly lost their leaves, but at some vantage points the travelers could see red and yellow hills that expanded out into the distance. No trail was wrong, as long as they headed north. They were walking single file through the twisting trails. John led them, always ready to be first, and Logan followed from behind. After a few hours, they decided to stop and take a break, as they would not make it to their next campsite until nightfall. They unpacked foodstuffs out of their backpacks to make sandwiches and sat upon a fallen tree on the side of the overgrown trail. "I love it out here," said John. "No stress, no worrying about what's going on back home."
"I'm just glad there's no bugs," said Eve with a shiver.
"Don't be a wuss," said John with a smirk.
"Jerk,"
Eve said with a backhanded to his shoulder. She smiled all the same.
Logan was sitting apart from the couple. He had been silent for this first leg of their adventure, which his friends were accustomed to. He spoke little but observed much. They had noticed he would look longingly on the horizon, like he was looking for an answer to a silent question.
"What about you, man?" said John between biting down on his turkey and cheese sandwich. "Why'd you really want to come with us?"
Logan replied while keeping his eyes on the cloudless sky.
"I suppose I'm running from something."
"What are you running from?" asked Eve.
Logan looked at her. He noticed her soft, beautiful face, but did not see her as a romantic attraction. Instead, he saw a confidant, a friend he couldn't tell what had been bothering him. "Maybe when we get back, I'll tell you," said Logan, returning to his sandwich. John rolled his eyes and said, "Always with the secrets." Logan, wanting to shift the spotlight to anything else but himself, said, "So, John, what are you going to do now that you've left the prison?" "I have a few interviews when we get back. I may work in security somewhere else since I have a few years' experience under my belt," said John. "You ever decide to go back to college? You're only a semester away, aren't you?" Logan shook his head. "Yeah, but I don't think I'll go back."
"Ugh, can we not talk about work while we're out here?" groaned Eve. "I gotta work 3 12s in a row at the hospital when we get back home."
"Well, I guess that officially makes Eve the breadwinner," joked Logan, with a forced, weak smile. John looked sidelong at Logan and said, "Hey, just right now. I'll get a job before our wedding."
"You better," said Eve with a mocking look of defiance, "or I'll find someone who does have a job."
"Oh, stop," said John with a laugh.
They finished their quick lunch and continued onwards. Their hike was initially planned to last a little over 2 weeks. They would wade through the Ozarks of Missouri before crossing to Illinois' Shawnee National Forest. They were off the grid save for when they needed to restock supplies or launder clothes. After hiking for a few more hours, they came to a bend in the trail. The putrid smell of death filled the 3 senses. What they found in their path shocked the peaceful setting. It was a dead body, mangled and barely recognizable as human. Freshly killed, organs were strewn around what was left of the body.
"What the?"
said John, unable to take his eyes off the grotesque scene. Eve's eyes were wide, and she felt like she was going to throw up. Even with all the accidents and disfigurements she had seen while being a registered nurse at the hospital, she had never seen anything like this. "What could have done this?" she said.
"A bear?"
said John, covering his nose.
"Doubtful," said Logan. "Bears are rare out here, and attacks are even rarer. The slashes in his torso came from something larger." "Either way, this is messed up," said John. "Anyone have any service?"
Eve already had her smartphone out to call 911, but she had no service. Neither did John or Logan, who checked theirs as well. Eve said, "We have to do something."
"Our campsite is closer than any town. We'll have to wait until we arrive to report it," said Logan. "We should get going then. Want to make sure we get there before nightfall," said John. They walked around the body, giving it a wide berth as if it would jump up and grab them. The three kept silent as they walked, not knowing exactly what to say. It was the first time many of them seen a human body in such a state. Not knowing who it was softened the blow, but it affected them anyhow. As the sun was about to set into the hilly horizon, they saw a crooked sign labeled Camp Dixon, 1 mile. They were tired from walking so briskly after they found the body, hoping to find some kind of closure after telling someone about it. They continued onwards as the light began to fade. Half-leaved trees stretched up around them, like bony hands clawing towards the sky. They eventually saw another sign posted on a tree before it was too dark to read. "Welcome to Camp Dixon." Beyond this sign, the forest opened up into a clearing with multiple campsites. Various tents of different sizes sat at the different sites, which numbered about 10. The dirt trail they were walking on became gravel as they walked into the campground. On the other side of the clearing, there was a gravel road leading from a main road with a small wooden building on it. It was an office, and the only permanent structure at Camp Dixon. A beat-up red Jeep was parked outside of the office. Most campsites had a fire built already. Country music reverberated around the campground as John, Eve, and Logan walked down the gravel trail towards the office. Some people were talking quietly, and shadowy figures were seen passing between them and their campfires. Others were seen sitting in chairs around the fires, only visible due to the light of the flames dancing on their faces. The three friends entered the small rustic office building. It was as small inside as it looked outside. Along the walls and on small shelves were camping tools and memorabilia for sale. Matches, lighters, pocket knives, koozies, and such. There was a single counter, lit by an old dull desk lamp. Behind it sat a woman in her mid-40s, working on a crossword puzzle. Her jowls formed into a frown as she watched the group walk in. Putting down her puzzle book and pushing up her reading glasses, she brought out a sign-in sheet from behind the counter. On the wall behind her was an old Winchester Model 12 pump-action shotgun with a wood stock and forend. "Welcome to Camp Dixon," she said monotonely for probably the 1000th time in her life. "Names?" John approached the counter and said, "My name's John Kilroy. This is Eve and Logan. We—" "Okay, sign in," she grumbled as she spun the sign-in sheet towards them on the counter. "Actually, there's something we need to tell you about," said John. "We found a dead body on the trail, about 15 to 20 miles south of here." The woman showed no emotion as she said, "Oh?" John said, "Yeah, it looked like a bear attack." "Ain't no bears around here. If this is some kind of joke—" "This is no joke, I assure you," said Logan, stepping forward. "Something out there killed a full-grown man. We would have called the police, but we didn't have cell service." The woman took the three friends in, her gaze darting from over her reading glasses at each of them before saying, "All right, I'll report it. You're at campsite number 7. Checkouts by noon tomorrow." "Well, let us know if you need any more information," said John, not convinced she believed them. They exited the office and Logan said, "We reported it. That's all we can do." "I don't feel right about it, though," said John. "I should have just asked to use the phone." "Let's just try to forget it," said Eve, putting her hand on John's shoulder. "Like Logan said, we told someone and it's out of our hands." "I guess you're right. She said Site 7, said John. "Indeed. I think we all could use some rest and forget about what we saw, said Logan. They hastily set up camp as the night afforded them little to no light. The music from another site had subsided, yet Logan lay awake. He could see their campfire casting dancing shadows on the side of his tent. They had hiked 6 hours that day, and he was exhausted from it, but sleep still evaded him. Then he saw the fire cast another shadow on his tent. It was something on all fours, but it was hard to tell as the flames of the campfire kept the shadows moving in odd directions. Logan kept still, controlling his breath as he tried to listen, but no sound could be heard. Then he saw another figure pass, then another. A total of 10 figures passed by the fire until there was nothing but normal shadows. The silence was broken as a woman's scream shattered the night. This was followed by an animalistic howl that sounded both high and low-pitched at the same time. The air was filled with shouting, screams, and mysterious baying. Logan threw on some jeans and a hoodie and slowly unzipped enough of his tent flap to poke his head out. In the tent next to him, he saw John had done the same. Beyond their sight, he could only see darkness and some campfire still smoldering. Every now and then, he would see red lights blink instantly, then go away.
"What the fuck is going on?"
John whispered, his voice barely carrying through the commotion.
"Don't know," whispered Logan back to him. "I think we're under attack."
"From who?" "No idea, but we should get out of here."
"Roger that,"
said John, and his head disappeared back into the tent. Logan turned back as well and got his pack ready, leaving his sleeping bag and pad. He had a pocket knife that he had ready just in case. He slowly unzipped his tent and stepped out, quickly followed by John and Eve from their tent. There were fewer screams, but they were still echoing from further away as people tried to run.
"Get out of the light,"
said Logan, motioning for them to duck into the darkness behind their tents. The 3 ducked down and Logan whispered, "Our best hope is to get to the office and bunker down there. Maybe the camp curator is still there with the jeep."
"John, I'm scared,"
said Eve, her voice trembling.
"It'll be okay,"
said John, wrapping his arm around his fiance's waist.
"Stay close to me."
"Keep low and quiet. Stick to the shadows," said Logan, who had already plotted a path back to the check-in office in his head. They snuck through the dark behind tents and around trees towards the building. The dull light from the desk lamp shone through the only window, showing them their goal. Every now and then, one of them would stumble or trip in the darkness as they could not see. After a few minutes of carefully navigating the maze of tents, they had made their way to the office, where the door was wide open. They could faintly see a blood trail leading to the building. At this point, the screams from fleeing campers were barely auditory, since they were far into the woods. John peeked around the corner of the doorway and saw the camp curator propped up against the counter. Scratches ran up from her legs to her torso, and she was coughing up blood. The 3 dashed in and quickly closed the door, locking it behind them. Logan moved the desk lamp down onto the floor, so they could still somewhat see, but it would not shine through the window.
"What the hell's going on?"
John asked the dying woman in a low voice. Those things," she managed to painfully say. "Shh, don't talk, save your strength," said Eve, who began checking her wounds. "What things?" asked Logan. "They're monsters," gasped the woman as she lost consciousness. "We have to get her to a hospital," said Eve. "She'll die of blood loss." "We can't leave," said Logan. "What? But she'll die," said Eve quickly. "She's bleeding out." Logan responded, "If we try to take her out there, there's a high probability that we'll face the same fate. We'd be defenseless in the dark." Eve flashed her eyes at John and said, "John, tell him we have to get her help." John bowed his head and said,
"He's right, babe. I'm sorry. I won't risk our lives, no matter how much I want to help her."
Eve looked incredulous, but decided to do what she could to help the woman. She pulled a first aid kit from behind the counter and started bandaging some of the more lethal wounds. She knew it was futile, as she suspected the woman had a punctured lung that was filling with fluid, but she had to do something.
As she went to work binding the curator's wounds, Logan picked up the phone that was on the desk. He held the receiver to his ear and heard nothing. No ringtone, no busy signal. Nothing. John found the Jeep's keys on the counter and pocketed them, saying, "We'll stay here tonight, but if we have to go, at least we can use the Jeep." "Now you're going to steal her Jeep?" said Eve, feeling lost. "I'm not stealing it, I'm just borrowing it," said John. "It's probably impossible, but we should try to get some sleep," said Logan. "One of us should keep watch for a few hours and switch off. I'll take the first shift." Although they needed the sleep, they would barely find any this night. The screams finally subsided, but the three were anxious that whatever had attacked the campground would return. John finally got irritated of trying to sleep and told Logan he'll take up the watch, equipping himself with the pump shotgun that was on the wall. He found 5 shells in a drawer under the counter and loaded them into it before sitting down behind the counter. Logan laid down on the hardwood floor, propping his head up with his pack. He lay there sleepless until morning. Eve at least was able to get a few hours of restless sleep. John got everyone up once the sun had risen, and they opened the door to the office. What lay before them was a scene of mass carnage. Tents were ripped apart and bodies were everywhere. Men, women, and children lay dead around the campground. Some bodies were intact, but most had limbs ripped off. Blood was everywhere. Coolers holding food and beer were thrown around, their contents scattered along the ground. The three stood there, stunned for what felt like ages, before Logan finally spoke up. "We should go." I don't know what the hell this is," said John. "John, I want to go home," said Eve. "Yeah, we should head home," Logan agreed. They got to the Jeep and threw their packs in the back hatch. John climbed behind the wheel and started the engine. Eve got to the passenger side and Logan jumped into the back seat. John turned on the FM radio and started switching through stations, most of which was just static or silence, until one station he switched it to had a voice. The voice was in the middle of saying, "Truly unprecedented. All across the United States there are reports of attacks from large humanoid creatures. The military is currently mobilizing across the country in response to this unknown threat. Everyone should remain in your homes and do not go out at night. I repeat, do not go out at night." "We're under attack?" said John, thinking out loud. "So this is going on everywhere," said Logan, his voice trailing off as he got lost in thought. "We can get back home in 5 hours or a little less if I haul ass," said John. They left Camp Dixon. The trip that was supposed to be peaceful and meant to clear their minds was over. Rather than feeling hopeful and a part of nature, they felt hollow. They just wanted to get home and be with their families, but their journey back would prove more difficult than they could imagine.